Hello, world, and welcome back to another episode of Practicing Awakening from a Meaning Crisis. My name is Sarah, and I'm here with my friend Lizelle. And today we're going to be talking about episode 19, which is called Augustine and Aquinas. So I'm going to pass it over to Lizelle to get us started with a quote.
Hello, world. I'm going to read from one of the books that's recommended in this episode about being a philosopher. So he's talking about Henry Corbin, or Corbin, I don't know how to pronounce his name. And he says, he was a philosopher pursuing a quest. At the age of 70, he wrote, to be a philosopher is to take to the road, never settling down in some place of satisfaction with a theory of the world, not even in a place of reformation, nor of some illusionary transformation of the conditions of this world. It aims for self-transformation, for the inner metamorphosis which is implied by the notion of a new or spiritual rebirth. The adventure of the mystical philosopher is essentially seen as a voyage which progresses towards the light. Thus far, our scripture reading.
It's funny, yeah, how that light, you're in constant pursuit of it. And like in that quote he's describing, there's no theory of the world. There's no kind of a proposition that you land on, or I guess he's like saying, always aspire towards. And I continue to say that that's the analogy of astrology, what the sun represents, is that ideal to which you strive towards, but that which you can never fully attain. So you're always trying to be whatever it is that your sun sign is.
It actually also kind of connects to today's episode in the sense that, well, the two worlds mythology is always also about aspiring to be that which you cannot really be. But
yeah, maybe in a different sense too.
In a different sense, indeed, and in a sense that I personally don't find very healthy. So
yeah, that's kind of what I was like. I like that you're delving deeper in by the readings, where I'm kind of getting this surface level, but still really deep. Like I don't think that I would be so overwhelmed if I was also trying to read along with this, and I think that that's possible. I don't think that everybody would be like that. It's just more helpful for me to have the full introduction and then perhaps go back through and like really dig in. But yeah, so
like I said last time, I am overwhelmed. It is overwhelming also reading. It's a lot to
and
process.
for you to say that, somebody that's like enthralled and like so lit up to delve into it, but it can just be a lot of information because these are people. So Augustine has a full life, and it's I'm just getting a little small bite of it from what John's talking about, and you even got like a whole 5-course meal of him to like really take apart. And so there are elements to his thinking that aren't necessarily that easy to align with, but then you get this like really elegant,
I get to see the other
message.
side as well. I think,
which is interesting to see the dark side and the light of pursuing the light.
I think John is, in many of these things, is very polite, or maybe he just sees it differently than I. That is also very possible. So I get the fuller picture, not the full picture, but a fuller picture, indeed, by reading the books. I highly recommend it. Like before, like I told you, like I have a deep longing to at a certain point just stop gaining new knowledge and just reading for all the books that I've already read again, just to reabsorb them, to just be still with them for a while. But
well, more on that at the end of this episode.
Yeah, more on that to come.
So Plotinus, we covered Plotinus in the last episode, and like you mentioned, like he's got a really brief recap of this one. It basically comes down to just a minute or two, and the one thing that I wrote down was that there was a grand unification through Plotinus of science, spirituality, and therapy through the Stoicism. Well, that final one, therapy through Stoicism, the other two from other
Aristotle science, the spirituality Plato, and then the therapy, the Stoics.
Yeah.
Mm.
So any more on Plotinus that you have?
No, not really.
Okay. He moves us into Augustine, right?
Yes.
So we begin here. He's saying sometime around 270 CE is around the time when Plotinus
Yes.
was writing. And then just after that, the Roman Empire was in decline. And that was hence the end of the ancient world, as he says.
Yeah, that's the time of Augustine. Augustine experiences the decline very. And I see here Augustine was born in 354. He was baptized in 387. And he died 28 August 430.
Seems like he lived a long time.
If I'm not mistaken, it is almost the same time as Hypatia, that they kind of overlapped each other a little bit. I might be mistaken. I thought she was also in the early 400s.
Well,
That she died.
he's living through the Hellenistic astrology like onset, like when people actually start doing natal charts. So prior to this, because 410 is the first natal chart that we actually have. And I know that because my birthday is 410, but it was the year 410 that it happened. And so natal charts become a thing at this time. So people start to focus there again, no longer on mundane astrology, no longer on the world and how the kings are affected, but the rich are starting to get this ability to, converse with the oracle and find out their own story, how it relates to the stars.
Well, Augustine writes on astrology. He was very enthusiastic about it, and then of course when he became a Christian he rejected everything, so of course he rejected astrology as well. And Plotinus wrote on astrology. I can't remember, it was a while back that I read Plotinus. I didn't write Plotinus. But I know he writes on astrology, and I think it's more he is very much because he also sees this whole, that there's a structure to the cosmos and that everything influences everything is part of the one, but he does reject a certain perspective on astrology, that it causes it. I think he sees it more as if I remember correctly, this is a while back, but I think I remember correctly, he sees it more as correlation rather than causal. The influence of the stars on human beings. It's like we all go through the phases together, and I think that's kind of how you, because you're like, oh, how are you doing, because this is what's happening to these planets, and so maybe you're also experiencing something like that.
And I think this is kind of that move to correlational. I think prior to this, when we had in astrology, for instance, Ptolemy comes in and tries to science it, tries to make it to where there's reason for it. And so, I think that then there's this move to a correlational pattern as opposed to it being a causation, which is what the omens used to say, like, oh, there's a full moon, shit, the moon, the god's gonna, or king's gonna die. So then it was causing the thing to happen, whereas and it was, and in fact, I mean, in some sense they saw it as a sign of,
but that's more, I see that as more correlation than
it is in that when it's a sign, as opposed to it being direct
cause of
action, something that's inflicted by the gods to, it's weird, symbols and messages. And
well, speaking of symbols, we're going to come to Chetam later.
We're jumping ahead on the conversations.
And we didn't ironically touch on any of this in the pre-conversation, but
I know, we're usually pretty thorough, but we didn't.
But it's fun. It's new exploration all the time.
The cave is always changing, even though it stays in the same place.
Yes.
Okay, so we're moving into Augustine, and Augustine is bringing the change. is what I have written here.
Whoa.
As the Roman Empire, no, DJ JC last time. Now
Yeah,
we got
yeah.
Augustine bringing the change. So, as the Roman Empire approaches its final stages, I'm glad you were able to decipher my notes from here. I said Mani influenced light has to be liberated by gnosis.
Yeah. So Augustine has the influence of Christianity, Gnosticism, and Neoplatonism. And as I've mentioned, like basically all the footnotes, now I'm not opening it at something that's not, but a lot of the footnotes is as seen in Plotinus here and here, seen in Plotinus here and here, as seen in Plotinus here and here. So he quotes Plotinus a lot. So it's very clear he's in Plotinus' influence on him. Of course, he's super duper Christian eventually. So the Christian comes, and the Gnosticism, I think John implies that it's not that clear because Manichaeism is, I don't know how to pronounce it in English, is Manichaeism is not necessarily the religion of Mani is not necessarily, some don't see it as a Gnostic religion, but it is very much the real evil and the real good, the real light and the real darkness struggling, and this world being completely dark and evil and bad and should be rejected, so that the other world can be accessed and we can live super duper like always there and never here. So, and honestly, I see a lot of that still in the Confessions as well, like him complaining about or confessing about the fact that he enjoys music. I was just at a Bruce Springsteen concert, and my God, it was amazing because we were close to the stage and you could feel the drums, you could feel it, your heartbeat change because of this music. And if you're not allowed to enjoy that, because the idea is it binds you to the earth.
Right.
That's why you can't enjoy sensual pleasures, because it binds you to the earth, and the earth is evil, which to me is definitely not Jewish. So it's not Judeo-Christian. There's some of it in Christianity, but that might be Gnosticism's influence on early Christianity as well. So, but it's not Jewish, that's for sure. That this hatred of this world. So yeah, I actually see Mani in here more than I would like. And also in one thing, he's like, I haven't read it here, but I know it from my studies. I think Augustine says that there's no such thing as evil. It doesn't have its own existence. Well, Manichaeism is very much that it has its own existence. So that's him kind of rejecting that then, completely the other side. He's like, no, it's the absence of the good. That is what evil is. It's, yeah. So he very much rejects the flesh. And that's why, as I mentioned to you, we're very fleshy today. We're not rejecting the flesh.
Yes. And yeah, not planned on my part, but it comes through too for me that that's a big problem that I have with myself when I'm having this, consideration of, yeah, a life of a religion that denounces part of me, you know, from my understanding of it. And my understanding is based on what other people think of it, because I don't have that full direct connection with what's actually being said. And maybe it is being said too that is the case, that part of me is rejected. And so yeah, there's this rejection of the earthly desires. I mean, we saw it with the Buddha. It's like, why?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's wrong
It's
too.
just the other side of the having mode.
It's just the other side of
Yeah.
the having mode. So yeah, that's definitely not something that I.
But that's kind of packed into this two world mythology, which we're
Yeah.
gonna come back to later again, this two world mythology. Like, so in a sense, I think it's good that uh, what's his name? The other one, the last one, August,
Aquinas.
um, the big theologian in the Catholic Church. What's his name?
I'm asking you.
Thomas Aquinas.
Okay.
Thomas
Oh,
Aquinas.
okay. Yeah.
Maybe it's good that Thomas Aquinas ruined the two world mythology for us accidentally, because that is what the two-world mythology implies. It implies that things of this world is actually keeping you from achieving the higher realms, and you should spurn that. You should get away from that. You should not delight yourself in the senses. And
Still not a convincing argument.
well, we'll get back to that. I
Yeah.
think let's go on a little bit.
Okay.
Because there's a certain point there where it's relevant in Augustine.
So with Augustine, there's this story of him stealing fruit, and he has a big struggle with this because he did it specifically because he knew it was wrong, and so he was intending to be sneaky.
As we will say, Hermes. Who was the sneaky god?
Yeah, I think Hermes would be. Yeah,
Hermes,
he's the
Hermes was a player.
Yeah, so
he shows a lot of self-loathing, and that's why I told you that it was a really difficult book for me to read. I once told Robert, like, oh, I'm struggling with reading this book, and he's like, yeah, the theology is pretty difficult. I'm like, well, no, I lived and breathed theology for years. It's the emotional impact it has on me, or the self-loathing, because I start then to loathe myself, and then I'm like, yeah, I don't want to loathe myself because I enjoy eating an apple, or seeing a hare run across a field, because he also writes about how bad that is, getting caught up watching hares running across the field or something like that. It's, what the fuck?
Yeah, why torture yourself?
Yeah, it's a lot of
interesting
self-loathing
too, because he's very influenced by Paul, like we said earlier, and so that's that inner conflict, and he's talking about it here too. He's saying he is riven with inner conflict because and as he puts it in this episode, he's a sex addict, and so he struggles with this and the evil of this world, so that inner conflict within himself, and then the evil of this world.
See, that to me, especially the evil of this world, is very monotheism, and he doesn't necessarily pick it up from Paul, but he finds a soulmate in Paul, because Paul also has this. So that's why he loves Paul. While he like, oh, here's the answer. I think in Romans, I don't know if that's a passage that we read, but John referred to it in the past as well. Like, who will me? What I want to do, I can't do, and what I don't want to do, I do. Who will save me from this wretched existence? Praise be to the Lord. He does it in Christ Jesus, our Savior. So that, and I'm quoting it, translating from my Afrikaans, so I don't know what the exact English is, but it comes down to that. And so he finds a Savior. He sees the struggle. Paul also has the struggle. What I want to do, I don't do. What I don't want to do, I do. And who will save me from this? And then Paul says, well, here he is. This guy will save you. And that's why he then embraces this guy.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of skipped ahead. I didn't realize I did, but yeah, as Augustine begins to travel the world, he's reading the works of Plotinus, and he says, in Plotinus, Plato lives again. And so he's developing this Neoplatonic worldview and understanding that there's this rising through levels of reality and the mystical experience. But that darkness is pulling, and I think you were talking about that too, that darkness is that gravitational pull that's pulling him down.
Yeah, and that's what I meant when I said we're going to come back to that. That's exactly what I meant, this page.
Okay.
Because that's he wants to stay in the ashram. He doesn't want to come back to this world. He wants to stay. The Manichaeans, like I said before, they couldn't eat meat, but the holiest of holy ones, I can't remember what they're called, the elect or something like that, couldn't even actually pluck their own fruit or harvest or anything, because they were killing the plants. And when they ate, they were only allowed to, they were vegans. They proclaimed that when they breathed out or burped afterwards, the soul of the plant will be released. So they released the souls from the plant life. And so they were very, yeah, they didn't like this world very much. They were also not allowed to have sex because, of course, the thing that binds us most to this world, and I think especially the thing that binds men most to this world, is really deeply sinking into a woman. That's really like, if you want to ground yourself as a man, love a woman. That's and so of course they didn't approve of that.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to come back to this dark, we talked about this, the woman being the dark force, the nature representative.
Yeah.
So yeah, and he had that beautiful experience, then he fell back and he fell into despair, which I do think we can relate to. Like if you have a high, if like our gathering, and then going away from that gathering, it is like you've tasted something so real and so beautiful and so intimate, and then it's gone, and you
Yeah.
have to live in the everyday world again. So we both experienced that despair after a spiritual high. So I get that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
then I think for me, it's more like, well, of course, we're not going to be able to live there. But for him, it was like, it's because I'm so sinful and because this world is so bad that I'm not capable of living there. And so he started rejecting himself, his
Yeah.
flesh,
Yeah.
his very much his senses completely, and and the world and woman.
I'm like really feeling into this idea of trying to manipulate God with that move. It's almost like, okay, well, I have control because I just won't worry about those things that I have desire for. And I know that this isn't okay. I can sense a response already.
I'm not sure if that's in. I can see that could be some people's, but I don't see that in Augustine. I
Yeah.
generally see a very intense, deep self-loathing in Augustine.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. I wonder what that is. Because I'm also like rearranging the Paul dynamic. Paul
Mm-hmm.
sees this as a conflict within God,
Yeah.
right? Or the natural
Yes.
order, I guess.
Yeah. Paul
And so I'm
did.
kind
Yeah,
of like
indeed.
transposing that onto now Augustine and like, where is that coming from?
Well, he also saw it as a natural order, like because we're in the fallen world, we are fallen. We are born in sin. I think it was Augustine again. I don't know the Latin terms. We were created posse non peccare, able not to sin. But after the fall, we're non posse non peccare. We're not able not to sin. So we are, as human beings, we suck.
We suck.
We
We're
suck.
sinful. We're full of sin. All we do is get off track.
Yeah.
Well, then why
Licking
did
the
you give
open
us
sore of life.
agency?
Yeah. And like I read this book to counteract the
I like
depression
that.
I felt by reading this book, and it's make believe by his lover that he sent away. I think it's make believe. I assume it's make believe. And she writes exactly like, "When did you stop enjoying smelling my hair? It's isn't it isn't it like blasphemy to reject the gifts of God almost, you know?"
And that book you said was written from like the perspective of his lover who he sent away and kept her son that he
Yeah,
had
his
with
son.
her.
Well, according to the book, and I don't, well, he himself writes also that she was forced to leave me, like she was taken away from me, and my heart was bleeding for her because he was faithful. Like that's also why I said, like, yeah, sex addict. He was faithful to one woman for a very long time, like as if they were married. I don't know if that's a sex addict or if he actually just loved her and they had sex, you know. That's and when she was taken away, he did start sleeping around. He says that, but that's different. But for years and years and years, he lived with this woman, and so he does write when she was taken away, he's hard. So what she says is that Monica, Augustine's mom, but I don't know if that's true, forced her to leave. Well, Monica did have a little. They did have a little Oedipus relationship going on, so it's not impossible. Like Monica had a dream where the words that were spoken, I can't exactly remember, something like where you are, I will be, or where I am, he will be. And then this book says that was a Roman marriage vow. So Monica had a dream about Augustine, her son, saying a marriage vow to her. And she interpreted it as like, he will be in my religion, which eventually he did. He came to her religion. But there was some Freudian things going on for sure there. So she couldn't take the fact that he actually loved another woman. At least that's what this book says. Like, but we're going off track, completely off track.
No, but I like it because that's just good to know for the practice of like when you're like you were reading a book and it's causing you despair because that's what the guy's writing about. Like he's self-loathing. And so in order to, this is the psychotechnology, the machinery. So it's like, yeah, provide that balance of this is, you know, a little fun play to, yeah, coincide with what I have to read here about this despair, because that's also important to visit.
Yeah. But Justine Gardner is not just a frivolous guy either. I mean, he's a great philosopher. He wrote Sophie's World and other books. That's quite. I will very much more gladly prescribe to his worldview than to Augustine's.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
But I like that. I like that.
Balancing
practice.
it. I had to, because like I said last time, I'm completely influenced by books I read, and I just wouldn't allow myself to be solely influenced by that. So.
Okay, well, somehow Augustine has this insight that we are driven by love of becoming one within and one with what's real.
Yeah, that sounds very Neoplatonic to me. The one, right?
A love for what's true, good, and beautiful. So he's kind of concluded that at the heart of reason is love.
Yeah.
And my capacity for love has been thwarted by my sexuality. Therefore, I need to be healed.
I do see that.
Yeah.
I do struggle with relationship with men for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
Because our ability to love is thwarted a little bit by sexuality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we got into a deeper conversation that we don't necessarily have to redo, but there is something about the way our sexuality is manipulated by marketing. And that, you know, having a role in feeling like we need to be healed from it, because yeah, it feels like it's like an evil possession from my perspective of Hollywood, particularly how Hollywood has commoditized a lot of elements of our being, just like attention, also just like our body, like physically commoditized, and you know, injecting ourselves with all kinds of fillers and what the fuck ever. But yeah, that was the thing that I felt like I needed to be healed from, was like, why is there this aspiration to be looking the exact same with the exact lip filler, with the exact eyebrows, with the exact ass, with the exact tits? You know, like, why do you want to be put together like that? And that was what I was like rejecting out completely. And so yeah, it turned into like this complete opposite. Okay, so now I need to go in the complete opposite.
But to me, that is actually exactly the same as Augustine's self-loathing.
Yes.
I see deep self-loathing in that. That you just cannot accept yourself with your own lips and your own ass, and maybe the two of us are just fortunate that we have great lips and asses all by ourselves. But I don't think so. I think it's a lot of hard work to accept yourself the way you are.
Yes.
And self-loathing can go both directions, either denying your body at all or making yourself in some kind of fake
way. Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah,
it's maybe I'm overly critical, but I see only self-loathing in that, in transforming yourself so in order to fit into the picture of what is sexually appealing, not even beautiful, what is sexually appealing.
Yeah. And that goes down to biology of like what makes me appear to be capable of, you know, rearing children. That's kind of what it comes down to. And so we're like manipulating that to where it's like the juicy pieces I want to be real juicy. And
well, okay, Evolution did that too in a
It
lot of
did, and that's
species,
the whole
though.
point. That's the whole point, is it's being manipulated. It's being,
Yeah,
that she wasn't born with that. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah,
and that's
yeah,
fine. Like there is like there's a time and place for itty bitty titties too. but yeah, that's the thing, is like it's manipulated in this way where that's a completely normal body type,
yeah,
and we commoditize it and make it, either more or less valuable. Yeah,
yeah,
it's just like, that's the part that feels like it needs the healing, not the,
yeah,
actual bodies,
yeah.
showing bodies.
The it's again the self-loathing, I'm sure. If we can just accept ourselves as who we really are, we don't have to either escape from
Mm.
this earth or be fake about it.
But we have
That's
to know ourselves truly. And that's the
mm,
thing. Yeah. Because people know
we,
themselves at such a superficial level that it's presented externally.
yeah. Oh man, what the world needs now is depth, 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 depth.
Agape, agape.
Huh?
I said agape, agape, agape.
Agape, agape, agape. Exactly, exactly.
Right. That's what we're moving into. How do we grow in love? Because
We love.
we love. So we just do it. Because he was talking about how his sexuality
Only a man
thwarts
will ask that question.
his
How do we grow
ability.
in love? Dude, you love.
What's the procedural steps? I need a a memo, please. Document, bullets, numbered. um, that makes us fully realized persons, because he's reiterating that that's what agape is fully realizing the personhood of someone.
Yeah, and that's why he says New Platonism needs Christianity, because Christianity offers this love that makes us whole.
Okay, so in this part, John starts to talk about, I guess, how Plotinus influences Augustine through
Yes.
various different ways. So one of them is nomologically through the Aristotle worldview. The other was normative, like you said, he's influenced by Plato here, and then narrative, which is a Christian influence, particularly for Augustine. Okay, so what are these? Like, what am I naming here? Nomological, normative, and narrative.
Yeah. So John now circles these three terms over and over and over again. So he's also very concerned with that people understand what he's talking about. So he has, I have written the nomological order, the normative order, and the narrative order. So there's an order in the world, a law. Nomos is the Greek for law. So there's like, think of the natural laws. Aristotle worked with that. There's order in the world, and that's what that is in Plotinus's worldview, and then in Augustine's worldview through Plotinus. And then the normative order is, what's the norms that we act? What norms should we aspire to? What norms should we act out? And then he says we should do that, of course, which makes us better. So which gets us to move up more to the more real, to the more whole. We should do that. That's the norms that we should follow. And then the narrative order, which he gets from Christianity, I wrote realizing the good. So it's a story of how we realize the good, I think. And then he goes deep into that about meaning, how it relates to meaning. And I think you can take it back.
Yeah,
Back to you,
great
Sis.
summary. So no, that's, yeah. So it's interesting to like think about. We talk about how we take things for granted, just the way that we think. And so this is kind of describing ways that we formulate thought, this order that has been established. One of them being the nomological order, which is science of structure of reality, how things are ordered. And normative is, like you said, like how you can ascend those levels. Because Aristotle had it broken out to where like rocks and minerals that don't have life or whatever, these inanimate objects, are at the bottom, and then God's, of course, at the top. And so that was how he structured animals below humans and that kind of thing. So there was that ascent. And then the norm is to try to climb that, to try to level up. And the narrative would be progress, because that's what we got from that whole idea.
Yeah.
So now there's just this instinctive way that we have ordered the world in our mind based on those things. And then that the narrative
You make
order,
an interesting point here, because John now says, like, research shows this is what people need to find their life meaningful. But is it what we need to find our life meaningful because we have 1,000 years behind us of programming us that this is the way it is for you to live a meaningful life? Or is it just inherently what we need to find our life meaningful? Are we programmed to need these things to feel that our life is meaningful?
yeah.
Or
And what would be the purpose? Like, what would be the evolutionary purpose of needing meaning? Which would be like
yes.
to progress
Well,
into the future.
I meant more programmed by Augustine. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I think
the
John,
software.
we're programmed by nature. I
Yeah.
think that's what John implies. So it is an evolutionary thing then.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Are programmed by nature
Yeah.
to tell
And so
stories.
the psychotechnology is the software for how to navigate that instinct, which is like, it makes a lot of sense why that would be the instinct, to create meaning so that you do survive long enough, at
Yeah.
least to produce offspring.
Yeah.
That's for biology. I mean, for the DNA, that's what it wants.
Yeah. Well, happy people live longer. And if you feel your life is meaningful, you tend to have more positive emotions.
Yeah.
So just in that, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
cool.
yeah, they're probably healthier, so they have healthier offspring. And
Right. More viable. Yeah.
yeah.
Agape is leading me upward in a normative way. The world is
Preach it,
organized.
sister.
That's my affirmation for today.
Yeah. Say it again.
Sorry, it sounds like agape is leading me upward in a normative way.
There you go.
The world is organized so that all three orders come together, so that normative, nomological, and narrative come together. And then he moves into this discussion of three components of meaning.
Yeah.
And you corrected me with a sense of, because I just had the words listed. So a sense of coherence, a sense of significance, and a sense of purpose are all three components of meaning.
And all three miraculously found in Augustine.
All right. So a sense of coherence is related with that nomological order of what's intelligible, what's real.
How they fit together, how they make sense.
Yeah, things make sense. The having a sense of significance comes from the normative order, with how valuable, how good, or to be significant, for one to be significant.
Like I mentioned, I wrote how deep in reality. It doesn't feel like a full sentence, but it's beautiful words.
Yeah.
To be deep in reality.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how at one are you with reality?
Yeah.
For the significance determines or could, imply your significance. Interesting, though, that you chose deep, or I don't know if you quoted him, because it would seem like ascending, but we're talking now.
I can't imagine that I didn't quote him.
Yeah. How deep and real.
But he does talk about this a lot in After Socrates, that it's a bidirectional movement, actually. It's and ascending and deepening, coming deeper into contact, deeper into being. So it's a bidirectional. It's not just going up anymore. It's because, okay, but maybe we're like skipping a whole.
I was going to say, you're
1,000
moving to
years.
after Socrates.
we're skipping 1,000 years here, but it's okay.
Way after Socrates.
But yeah, so because there's this idea of Aristotle, like things build up and they get better. It's we don't necessarily buy into that anymore. Like going deep is pretty great.
Yeah.
Please go deep.
Oh. Okay, so that's significance.
Deeper
Significance. And then there's purpose, which goes along with narrative order. It's the course or direction. It's the story.
Yes.
Hmm.
Does your life have a direction?
All right, cool. So we've changed the orders now into components of meaning. I like it when things just transpose onto each other like that. And then the next thing that I have written is, yeah, I kind of got lost because he just kept reiterating scientific,
Yeah.
therapeutic, spiritual. It's like the three. This is the type of understanding that we had. I think that's the point that you're getting, or that you told me that we're getting to, is that this is what we have to lose. All of this leading up. And so part of that is that scientific, therapeutic, and spiritual understanding.
Oh, I thought you once mentioned the 3 points where 2 lines connect.
Yeah.
That popped in my mind when he
I've
was
been
talking.
thinking about that a lot. We've been having a lot of triangles come up too. So 3 points where 2 lines meet, 3 separate instances of 2 points meeting. And in that sense, like it's not simultaneous or like all at once. Like there's something about that that catches me when I hear that. I mean, I used to hate it. I used to hate that line in the song. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But now it makes a lot more sense.
Existentially connects us with what is good, I said, the normative order. Connects us with what is real, the nomological order. And then the narrative order, how we can move something through history. Probably how we can move through history.
Yeah. So we can become better. Yeah.
Or be formed by history. Or making our own stories, writing our own stories, and how we participate in the story of the world. Okay. So then he says Augustine lays the foundations for the medieval worldview. And what is important to John is he teaches us, he shows us how our culture articulated the actual revolution. Because all these big figures of the actual revolution comes together in Augustine, and then Augustine creates basically our cultural framework, how the West at least sees reality for 1,000 years.
You remember how we were talking about how John is kind of this medium within which multiple things come together and kind of gets alchemized out? Yeah, like there's figures in history where that transformation happens through. It's like the transformation of thought can actually happen through a vessel too.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
Maybe it can't happen without a vessel. But according to John, the next vessel is going to be the Sangha. Or the church, the Christ.
Yeah.
The collective.
Mary, the body. Yeah.
Yeah, the body. Yeah. The ecclesia. It can't happen without a body. It can't. No. It needs a human being or a collective.
Body. Yeah.
Or an entity at least.
Yeah.
And then he writes this beautiful thing. So what Augustine offers us is a worldview that incorporates the deepest scientific legitimacy, totally integrated with the most profound spirituality. I have a thing for the word profound nowadays. Like every time we say it's profound, I'm like, oh yeah. It's like, and joined with a personal project of therapeutic change and sapiential education, the cultivation of genuine wisdom within a community. That's what Augustine offered us. But we lost it. And then he says, are we bereft forever?
No.
Yes. He says no.
Yeah, for that part, I just have, how does it all come apart? And so I think he was saying like we've gone through now the historical understanding. And yeah.
We've gone through the historical understanding of how meaningful way to view the world, this worldview was.
Yeah.
So now we understand how it was formed, this absolutely deeply meaningful worldview. And now we're going to see how we lost it. The next couple of episodes is like, but how it got lost. How did we lose it?
Okay. So
Paradise Lost.
Paradise Lost. So this comes down to then the Great Schism.
I just have it written, when the Roman Empire falls, the standard of living is only again achieved in 1750 in London, and then I have the Great Schism.
Okay.
So
which is a really good point, because like it's what he was saying with that was like, yeah, now we've hit that point where we don't get back to a higher standard of living until the 1700s, mid 1700s.
yeah.
And we're talking from like 1,000. So that's a
no.
yeah.
Augustine was like 400.
Okay.
It's even longer than that.
Okay.
It's like,
jeez.
yeah, that the standard of living was negatively affected by the fall of the Roman Empire. And I'm not quite convinced that it wasn't also negatively affected by Augustine, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But I know Chris will hate me for saying that because he loves Augustine.
Okay, so now okay, so we have in 1054, so that was just talking about Augustine.
No, 1054 was the big schism.
Okay. Okay. So 1054 was when the Eastern Orthodox, which was kind of like influenced or at least written in Greek, I guess is what I gathered. He said Greek.
They spoke Greek. Spoke Greek.
And then the Western, which would be Catholic, the Latin, they separate. They just like have a divorce, basically.
So maybe to give you context what's happening here, we're kind of done with Augustine now. We're now moving to Aquinas. He's now giving the build up for how did Aquinas happen. That's what's happening now in this part of the episode. He doesn't actually state it, but it's maybe helpful to state it.
Okay, cool. So moving into Aquinas now. So with that, he says that Western Christianity loses some of its mystical myth.
I do want to point out that this Catholic refers to all of Christianity.
I said Christianity loses some of its Neoplatonic. So yes, I combined them. It's actually Western Christianity that lost some of the Neoplatonic mystical myth. So it's less Platonic and more Aristotelian.
Yes.
So we're moving more into kind of reason and okay, so he says he mentions Chetham here.
Yes. So, and I told you I wrote down sneaky because he just in this episode he says like, are we lost forever? Do we have no hope left? And then he says, no, there is a solution to the meaning crisis. And I cheated, and I've already watched these episodes, so I know one of the solutions to the meaning crisis is exactly one of this dude, Henry Corbin.
James Hillman influenced my astrology instructor very much.
I've got a few of his books as well.
That's really funny.
They're both very interesting Jungians. So he throws in the solution in this episode by referring to his books, but of course there are many other people who write on this topic, but he decided no, he's gonna refer to this guy's book writing on the topic of how the psychotechnology of reading changes. That's where this comes in. So I'm going to read a part. Oh, first I have to say of Augustine, because it's funny because John says like, yeah, people used to read out loud. And so Augustine writes about his great teacher, Ambrose. And he's like, whoa, when he was reading, his eyes ran over the page and his heart perceived the sense, but his voice and his tongue were silent. So Ambrose, he was like famous for being an exception to the rule and actually reading silently. And I think he was also kind of sneaky. All these great men are very sneaky sometimes, because Augustine wrote, when he was reading, everyone felt too bad to bother him, so they just left him read. So that was his technique, because he also says, like, he thinks that Ambrose knows that if he read out loud, even if he just read himself, people will hear, because people would sit around him because they just wanted to be close to him. And if he read out loud, maybe someone heard something that they were interested in, and then they will ask him questions and bother him. So he was just like, okay, I'm going to just be on my own right now with my book. Sounds very familiar. I can relate. I can very much relate to Ambrose.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So he writes it beautifully. Which part? I think also this is really cool to read for people who are journalists. If writing and reading have been part of the reason we are cut off from the poetry of the world, we know too that reading, and without a doubt writing, can be ontological remedial. John uses those exact words. So we must speak, read, and write ourselves back into the world. The work of the imagination in the processes of reading and writing can be transformational. Again, Robert Kelly. Language is the ocean in which we live. For any operation in language is an operation in us too. And that's what keeps me interested in writing. I want to transform the nature of my experience, of the thing I experience. It is the transformation of self and world that we are after here through reading and writing. Words are powerful things.
Yeah.
Long live the Logos.
Long live the Logos. Cool. So that's talking about how there was a shift from the oral tradition of telling stories out loud, recitation, and being in community when stories were being told, to now being able to read on your own, to internalize what it is that the person's reading and have a different relationship with whatever the text was that they were reading, because they're no longer in this communal. It's now for them to reflect on internally.
It was so the image that comes to my mind, because when you speak, the image that comes to mind is this campfire idea, which is not what John is talking about. He's talking about they would sit in the monastery and someone would stand in front with an open book and everybody would sit there. So most of the time they were copying text actually, but if they had their reading time, someone would read out loud and then the rest would just listen. So it was like you shared the words. You were always sharing the words. You were never just kept it to yourself. It was always a communal thing. Others heard and participated. Like I said, Ambrose knew that if he read out loud, people would start asking him questions and would feel like, oh, we're not part of it. And he just wanted his own little world with the words. So, so that is how it was. It was in the monasteries, at least, and those were the people who could read.
Right.
The people in the monasteries.
Yeah.
Because he refers explicitly to this, how we read the changes. So it's not about telling stories around the campfire. It's how we read that changes, which is important.
Right. So exactly. It's different. And I'm also thinking too about how when people were able to start reading the Bible for themselves as opposed to a priest reading it to them. And I think this was something that was mentioned maybe early in the series. I feel like I'm getting it from here for some reason. But yeah, there's like and maybe it wasn't, but like this democratization of
that learning comes with the Reformation. And we're not there yet.
So. No. This comes back from when he starts to talk about how it became more accessible. Reading became more accessible at some stage in history that we've already discussed.
It's when language became easier. When we went to alphabetical language, because there's also now nouns. No, not nouns. What is the letters A, B, A, E, O, I?
Vowels.
So there's also now vowels.
Yeah.
That became easier.
So basically,
to
that reason that was probably coming up for me was because it was just like a distinctive psychotechnological move.
Yeah,
Like, okay,
that
here's
was
a
also
big,
that was yes,
yeah,
that was also
moment.
that was the part, the last big psychological change,
Okay.
psychotechnology. Indeed, that's why it's popping up. Good,
Okay. Now, when people read silently to
good
themselves,
refresher there.
yeah, right. Yes, recall. So, because now the focus is about coherence in language rather than that transformation that was kind of established when people started to read in this way for a narrative, for the sake of narrative, for the sake of there being progress in a storyline. Now it's for
Well, they're reading for transformation.
yeah.
They read with the idea that the book has something. The book is wiser. When I was paging through these again, that was both of these books amazing. Oh no, that was this book, which we're still coming to. Haha. They believe the book is wiser than they are, so they're reading with the idea of receiving instruction, like you would go about with a teacher.
Yeah.
They approach as a group. They approach the text. So it is it's like a more humble and more spiritual way of reading. It's
Yeah.
teach me, speak to me, I'm listening.
Yeah.
That's how they read.
Yeah. And so then it changes into now, because of this change in the way that humans were reading, where it was the external, now it's the internal. Now, because people are reading silently to themselves, therefore there's a coherence in language rather than the transformation. So what matters is that the various terms fit together coherently.
That's what he says.
And this is the new model for thought. And this is where he talks about extensive and intensive, the extensive being old. Thought is a conforming to the world and expanded into self-transformation, which gets replaced by this intensive way of thinking, which is that thought is to have coherent propositional language, to have a coherent set of propositions.
So I think that's, according to John, if I hear him correctly, this is where propositional knowledge started to reign, because he always speaks of the tyranny of propositional knowledge, and this is where it's usurped the throne.
Yeah.
Through this.
Oh, that's so interesting, because then he moves into, well, why? Why is there this shift?
Yeah.
And one of the things that he says is that the world is opening again, and we're moving towards the value of having logical, coherent, well-organized propositional theories. That's like the new psychotechnology. Is like, wow, we have this new thing. It's fucking bringing up AI thoughts for me. But anyway, and so yeah, it's like, ooh, let's
play with this toy.
Play with this little toy that we have. So that was the shift. And it also empowered argumentative skills. But in doing so, they begin to lose the psychotechnology of transformation, self-transformation. And this is where he mentions too that Aristotle was rediscovered as a result of the Crusades.
Yes. And they can't ignore Aristotle because he's part of Augustine's worldview, and Augustine's worldview is their worldview, so they have to acknowledge this mighty man. But he speaks things that is not incorporated in the Christian mythology. So how do we deal with that? That's the question. And then he speaks of the great man who came with an answer. At least that's my where I am in my notes. We did pass over Avicenna and Averroes.
Oh, I didn't get that. Please say more, because I don't think I have anything.
It's no, you did, because we talked about this before recording.
I want you to do it. I'm just kidding.
The one was very Augustinian, and the other one was very Aristotelian. So it's just part of the big transition. And the priority went to definitions and propositions. I think you just didn't mention the names.
I didn't say the words. Yes. Okay. I see what you mean. Yeah. So the intensive is more Aristotelian. You like that smell?
I'm trying to not.
So intensive is more Aristotelian and extensive. I don't know. What did you just say there? You said, because you said Augustine and Aristotle, didn't you?
Yeah, Augustine is more. In his worldview. No, this is
Okay.
separate. It's about the psychotechnologies. Like the intensive is when you read internally, and extensive is when you read out loud
Mm-hmm.
for conformity in the community and
Mm-hmm.
not internal coherence.
Mm-hmm.
But so Avicenna and Averroes is more like the switch from Augustine to Augustine, and then with him Plato to Aristotle. That's
okay. Yes. Okay.
but my notes is also very scrambled.
Mine's
So
so
I don't.
scrambled. Yeah, me too. Okay, so yeah, there's this crisis within Christianity that's arising. And yeah, like you said, there's going to be this great man that comes along.
Yes.
And yeah. No word is coming out. Challenges this. Challenges the crisis, I guess. So yeah, I have written here 1, change in reading psychotechnology, 2, change in how people see the world. And those were both contributions of Aristotle. And so Thomas Aquinas comes in and solves this problem.
I think it's too separate. The way people read is nothing to do with Aristotle.
Okay. I don't know what I wrote down there then.
Although, coming back to previous episode, he is the guy with a wheelbarrow full of books. So he has an influence on how people read. If we had to get to all those books, we can't read out loud. We have to freaking silently read to make it fast. So it's Aristotle's fault that we had to do the internal reading.
Yes. Okay, good. So
we can make anything connect if we want.
We can connect anything. Patterns are everywhere. Okay. So yeah, I don't know what that is. Okay, where are you at? Help me.
I'm at Aristotle.
Let's go.
Oh no, I'm lying. I'm at Aquinas, Thomas Aquinas.
Oh, okay.
So many A's. I get confused with all the A's.
Yes.
The pivotal figure.
The pivotal figure.
Yes, he's historically understood as Aristotelian, as following Aristotle. And I think when I didn't go that deep into him, he's very big in the Catholic Church, not so much in the Protestant Church, but we did, of course, study him a bit. And I learned that he was Aristotelian, or however you should. But John nowadays, especially when he speaks with David Schlinder or D.C. Schlinder, because he is of the view that he's more Platonic, and he wrote this love in the postmodern predicament is basically about a beautiful book, not as good in my view as his book on Plato, but still a beautiful book, and it's very much about Aquinas. But I want to read a sentence that I saw now that I underlined. So beautiful. Thus, love includes body and soul, intellect and will, movement and rest, eternity and time, the infinite and the finite, the divine and the human, and so on, while persevering every essential difference. The and of love, not the either or, but the and of love. Yeah. And over there is another sidetrack.
No, I love it. It continues to come up like linking verbs or like love, like bringing subject and object together through that. So anyway, this one's going to be edited a lot. So I think what he's kind of getting at right here in this moment is saying that there's this need to salvage the Christian worldview with Aristotle. Like he literally says that. And in order to do so, he goes to the fundamental grammar of the two worlds again. This is what Thomas Aquinas does.
Mm.
And so the real everyday world and the illusory world. Did I get that? Okay.
No, the everyday world was kind of seen as the illusory, and then the world of the forms were. So this two world is like, what is the fundamental grammar of the actual age? And it was this two world mythology. We are stuck in this lower world, and we want to go to this lower unreal world, and we want to go to this higher real world. That's the two worlds mythology.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this, Aquinas says like a great way to integrate Aristotle into the Christian mythology, saying, yes, like we still have these two worlds. This is the natural, and to this natural world, Aristotle with his science speaks. And it's a real world. It's not an illusionary world. It's real, which is already progress. Like seeing a world that is real. and then the Christian, the spiritual world, the supernatural world is more real though, more good, more beautiful, and more true. And so that's how he then combines and gives a place for Aristotle, because he puts him then in this real world. And the problem is what happens here. And I do have to mention that John mentions a few times, and I don't know exactly what exactly he refers to, but he says in this episode, when he talks of Aquinas, he might have attributed things to Aquinas that was actually done by his followers. So I have to mention that, because John is now currently really, it's important to him that he mentions it, so I have to mention it as well. But I don't know Aquinas well enough to know exactly what part of this that is the case for. But
good to know.
I'm saying this before I say the next, because I think it might be that. So remember, for Augustine, love was what moved the will. And because his love was corrupted, his will was corrupted. And, love was what moved the reason. And because his love was corrupted, his reason was corrupted.
Okay.
While here, he separates reason, he puts that in the Aristotelian part, in this world, this natural world. And he puts love in the supernatural part. So he separates love and reason. And this is then where we get what we now so deeply experience. And although I think it's kind of past, actually, or it's passing, I can feel it passing, this conflict between reason and love, like science and religion. That conflict was, of course, the man was brilliant, but he couldn't see the future, and he didn't foresee the consequences of this, because he couldn't foresee that science would explode in popularity, and everything will become about this world, about the natural world, and the supernatural world will lose its relevance as a consequence.
Yeah. So with this, faith is now assertions and creeds. So we're really moving into that, what we know as like science and spirituality being divorced from one another, where science gives you facts and propositions. And even, I guess what this is saying is maybe even faith took on that characteristic of being very much to do with propositional knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, I experience it like this, because when I lost my faith, it's because I lost my faith in the propositions. I'm like, I can't buy into that anymore. And basically, the only thing I couldn't buy into is that Christianity is the only path.
Yeah.
Because that's how I was raised. All everything else was from the devil. And then when I started studying the others, I'm like, this doesn't feel very demonic to me. It's like, it's pretty cool. Daimonic, maybe. But, yeah. But so it was propositional faith that I lost. And to me, that was faith. Although I most definitely had a participatory relationship with Christianity and with Christ especially. So, but now what I'm picking up again is this participation in the flow and the course of history, which John says was what faith used to be. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Participation with the flow.
Yeah, the course of history.
I have written down that the danger is, as we see the natural world more clearly, the supernatural world is no longer viable. And then the axial grammar is threatened to fall apart.
Yeah.
Man, it's so fragile.
And the irony is it used to be the stronger. This world was seen to be so fragile. The natural world was seen to be so fragile because the supernatural was so strong.
Yeah.
And now it's
that there is no supernatural. It doesn't even exist. That's how insignificant people think of it as. That's honestly, for the purposes of existing in this realm, is terrifying, because it's a free pass to do whatever, the nihilism. I guess. I don't know. I don't think it has to necessarily veer in that direction.
When I lost my faith, I didn't lose my morals. For me, it was. So when I read about, if there's no God, then, I said things like, oh, I'm going to do this. But that was just to teach. I only said it to one person because I wanted to annoy him. But I
don't so my experience was that it wasn't necessarily like nihilistic and losing my morals. It was, I didn't have an underlying place to put trust in, and so it was
But you
fear.
were much younger than me. You were much younger than me. That makes also a big difference. I was kind of set in my habits and my ways. This is
yes,
how I act.
Because I was 13.
Yeah, and I was 21.
Yeah,
that's a big difference.
Yeah, because for me, that faith provided security in a world that is so overwhelming that it's something to anchor onto, something to attach to, and something that I felt like I could communicate to, and in this way where there was a participatory relationship, and that I knew I was protected if I did things, if I made my sandwich in under 30 seconds at night, or whatever, like the trade-off was. So it was a fear thing for me, that losing my faith meant that nothing is real. This table, even though I can feel it, isn't what it appears to me to be. Like I just like nothing could anymore be what it appeared to be. I thought everybody was an actor that was living in that country. I was like, they're acting. None of this is real. So, and that I think that still continues. And that's where, you can lean in a little bit to conspiratorial. And
I was thinking of the Gnostics and the Truman Show.
Exactly. Like so I was definitely resonating with that episode when we talked about that last time too, of a facade, a veneer. There's just I have a real even yesterday I had a customer come in, and he's always asking about me. He's asking like, have you ever been out of the country? What do you do? And this kind of stuff. I don't necessarily think he means any harm, but there's something about him where I'm like, there's something under this. There's there's something, he is not being fully himself to me. And I think I have either an overactive mechanism that makes me think that about people, or it's something where it's machinery that's now functioning against me, because I believe that there's something that someone's not telling me. There's a deeper ulterior motive that he has for wanting to know these things about me.
This is very tricky. Because I was thinking about this morning, because I know I'm prone to jump to conclusions, I doubt all of my instincts and all of my conclusions that I come to by observing people. And I know deep inside me, I know I'm right. I know I'm right.
Yeah.
But especially when it comes to people's attitudes towards me, I don't make any interpretation. Like if someone doesn't tell me, hey, I love you or whatever, I will just assume that person doesn't care about me.
Mm.
It's because even if they show signs, I'm like, I'm not going to jump to conclusions here. I'm not. And it feels like that's what you're doing. It's like you're so, because we know well, maybe we don't even jump to conclusions. Maybe we are just actually good of reading people. You know, it's the many times when I thought when I picked something up and I thought, oh, but that can't be. Ah, that can't be. Then it turned out it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's
So my question then, and not to say that this is a solely woman thing, but is that something that men, like, is this like questioning ourselves? Because I mean, there's this sense of confidence that needs to be asserted when somebody's making a point, and there's like that confidence in my knowledge of knowing the thing so that I can be in that masculine and present the idea. But with the feminine, there's that open interpretation of like for some reason that connection with intuition requires there to be a sense of not knowing, a sense of, well, I need to trust my intuition. So like there's that sense of faith and belief in it, that thing that women are so intrinsically associated with, women's intuition. Like, okay, well, there's something there that's very meaningful. And wonder if it's causing that effect of, I don't know, fear, or a suspicion, a constant suspicion of the mystery of someone that's I don't know. Even, I mean, like clearly being like fun and flirtatious a bit, like I don't even know that I'm his type really, but like he's definitely trying to be fun, but in this way where there's like there's something there's underlying. It feels kind of sneaky. So anyway, and that's just like something that I like have no way to describe. It's just an intuitive feeling that I have. And it's adaptive, I think. I think women have to be that kind of adaptive.
Yeah, we are
tactical.
Physically the weaker sex. It's just true. We need other strengths to survive.
Yeah. And so tactically being able to, on a instant, be able to say, something's off, smells fishy, looks strange, whatever it is that's off about the thing. And maybe you could question me on, well, there's no reason behind that. You didn't come to that conclusion logically. And it's like, no. And I can't always. Sometimes you just feel it, you just sense it.
But don't you dare act against that.
No.
That's what
I had somebody
say.
walk me to my car. I said, I don't know that guy, but I'm going to be walked to my car. I'm not walking to my car by myself. Yeah. Oh, in the life of a woman, or in the mind of a woman anyway. I mean, it's necessary to, because like we were talking about earlier, like there's definitely something to not feeling yourself in your body. And I would never argue with that being a thing. Like people can obviously feel that. But we haven't described really what it is to be woman from, other than great books, people have described it, but for some reason that isn't like an installment in culture to know the power of being a woman, what all that comes with, what responsibility that comes with, what, how that makes, how even our power can be used against us and all these kinds of things. It isn't a fixture in our collective understanding of the dynamic, because there seems to be this kind of assumption that you can just pump up your tits, pump up your ass, pump up your lips, and you're a woman. Throw on some pumps too while you're at it, pumping all this stuff up, and that's woman.
Yeah. I do think maybe it's because women tend to be more silent, and like we
This
said,
is the thing.
it was supposed to be transmitted from mother to daughter, and that ended somewhere, sadly. So this knowledge, this deep knowledge of how to be a woman, has been lost. But I was Greg Henriquez had a conference, Consilience. I don't know what it was called. I think it was Consilience Conference. I don't know. And there were a couple of episodes that were specifically by women and for everyone, but by women, about being a woman. And there were a couple of men that joined, and it was lovely to have them also interact. And one of the women, I can't remember her name, talked about this, that the mysteries has been lost because this chain has been broken between mother and daughter transmission. And now we have to kind of rediscover it as sisters. That's kind of what we're doing. I think we're rediscovering being a woman as sisters. And that weekend, I was the first time I really, because Rachel Hayden, John had her on his show, for Voices of Vervaeke, and she was also there, and she has gone through a transition, and she spoke about how it was as a woman as opposed to being a man, and she knows, because she's the only one I know that really knows that. And the way she explained how it is being a woman, I was like, yes, that's so cool. Like, I didn't realize that was typically woman. I thought that was just like human. So it's so cool to hear what it is like being a woman from someone who knows both sides.
Yeah.
It was
Well, I think
it
that's really
was
important
really
to
cool.
mention too. And it gives me the opportunity to say, like, obviously, like, that's a thing, that's a thing that happens, that people do, that transition into a different sex. And, I don't know what's right or what's up and down in this world. So I'm not judging anybody's decision to make that change, but that is my question. And that's really interesting that somebody does have that perspective of being able to distinguish now. And to, that we have that opportunity to know that it really does enrich the conversation. It makes it richer. So in saying the things that I say, I don't necessarily mean to be combative with anybody. And I think that that's just like important for my psychological reconciliation here, to be like,
I do think it has taken gotten a little bit out of control. I do believe there are individuals who indeed are born in the wrong body, or I don't know how to say it. But I think all of us go through phases where we're uncomfortable in our own body, and it's become too easy for people to label that as, oh, I have to be the other sex. I think that's the problem, and that's why it's now a problem.
It's anything where you sell the package deal. It's like step 1, step 2, step 3, and you got it. And that's one of those package deals that is being sold to people. And because it makes you a lifelong patient, you cannot get out of medical care once you do that. So it's like, now you're just an investment, in my country at least, because we fucking thrive off the medical system and wars. So you're going to make a lot of money off these people, because for the rest of their life, they're going to need medication. And that's what they did to the elderly. So I see it happening to the youngest now. Okay.
I mean, who of us weren't confused when we were teenagers?
Exactly. Yeah, but I didn't even see it as that.
But because it wasn't an option, but now it's everywhere. So now, of course, you're going to pick it up and it's going to become an option. And
and it's not as reversible as they say it is.
Human beings are stupid, and never mind teenagers. I mean, really,
well, just to like rope it all back in, because this has something to do with our relationship with the natural, with what's real, with what we aspire towards. Like, imagine that the aspiration, the transcendence now is to just become my counterpart on this globe, on this planet. I just want to be my counterpart, because I feel so uncomfortable in this, that the only other thing that must exist is that. So then I'm going to pick that to be that, because maybe I'll just try something else on and make this world, maybe I can transcend this world in that way, because it doesn't make sense in this state. So now let me try to transcend, because gosh, we can transcend. It's really easy. All we got to do is flip a couple buttons, cut a couple things off, and and I know it's not that simple in all cases, but just as the general collective idea, like, it can be very sarcastically put in that frame.
Well, we have there is a deep hunger, I think, for transcendence and being able to be other than who I am, indeed, in the world.
From
When
Saul
we
to
were,
Paul. From
yeah,
Saul to Paul. Yeah.
when we had the Eros, Holly mentioned that suicide is also one of the ways that people deal with this, because
Yeah.
they long for spiritual change, but they don't know how, and that's the only drastic change they know of. So yeah, it's like when we talked about Gnosticism, their beauty was everyone kind of had their own myth. And if my myth of the white moth now becomes a general myth, it's going to be like, what the fuck? It doesn't mean anything to you. How can it mean something to you that you didn't experience that? But it's taking something that's very specific to a person or a couple of individuals and generalizing it and think, oh, this must be the solution for all. Or taking something that is in fact a solution for one person and then blaming them the opposite and say, no, you're just going on with the crowd or whatever. No, that person generally had this deep desire and, need. And by all means, if you have a deep need and there is ways to satisfy that need, embrace that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's difficult. I'm really happy that I'm very vanilla in my way of being, I think. Like very much attracted to men and only men, and luckily, because like I said, my relationship with them is confused because of the sexuality. So luckily I can have a normal relationship with a woman.
Yeah.
And very happy to be a woman. So I have no idea how it's like to be different from the norm, because I am so very much norm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's a source of that meaning crisis. That's why that comes up a lot. That's why that conversation comes up a lot. Because I think it's good to tease that one in particular, because there is, I don't know, it seems like there's just like a lot simpler of a solution, a less expensive solution. And for some people, it's not the solution. For some people, the solution is what it is, what is the norm that's been established, that was never meant to be a norm, but it just became a norm. But a lot of the people that are questioning their comfort levels and, anxiety and things like that, this is what it is. It's feeling like your natural world and your supernatural world, they just don't cohere, and they can't. Well, did you have any quotes to end on here?
I did. There's written end 143. Let's see what I always surprise myself when I come back to the books and see what I. Oh, yeah, it kind of brings me back to that Platonic thing that I referenced. It's kind of also what I said. Where do I start? It may happen in rare cases that the seeker can find his inner personal guide in a wholly inward way, wholly with a W. But for the majority of disciples, a master in earthly form is required. It is dangerous to experiment with the development of the soul, lacking a living connection to a tradition, to an established path. The isolated soul is easily lost in a wilderness of dangers. The stakes could not be higher. The question is, to whom do we entrust our souls?
Yes. Yeah, choose your loves. Whom do we entrust our soul?
Also, kind of maybe connecting to that intuition. How do we choose our loves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's something to training the intuition. It's an idea I've been playing with.
And now my philosophy makes so much more sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there are ways to explain it, of course. Maybe I've also read something similar in the past.
Right. Okay. Well, if you want to reason your way out of it, fine.
I want to love
Natural
my way
world
out
it
of
is. Okay. All right. Cool. So that is episode 19. And now we're moving into the 20s. We have hit a milestone because we talked about all the things that we are subject to lose in this meaning crisis. And so now we're moving forward with a different objective.
Well, we talked about everything that we have lost, and that is why we are in a meaning crisis.
Okay.
And now we're going to move to how did we lose it?
Cool.
What went wrong? All right. Because I'm not sure that losing Augustine was a bad thing.
She says after having read his book. So
and I've read The City of God, but that was a while back. But his other book.
Speaking from authority, we'll say.
No, we will not say that. I will not say that.
No.
There's no authority here, only intuition.
Okay. Only intuition. Yes, I like that. All right. So if you're interested in joining us for some more.
No. We're going to stop this to Socrates. When after Socrates, there's only 3 more episodes left.
Okay. So then okay, well, that just takes us out. I mean, we'll have fun things to check out too. I need to have another closing remark, but either way, cool. Ciao. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what to do here. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in and watching as we move through the series again. This is a really culminating episode, so feel free to go back through all 19 of the episodes and just kind of get that historical perspective, and that way you really know where this meaning crisis is stemming from. So hope that this has been really informative, and hope to see you in the next video as we move forward.
May the spirit of Sophia be with you.